The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason, he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Three little words. Yes, please be seated. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Just three little words. I love you. We've all heard those three little words, and we've all said them to someone we cared about, someone we loved, maybe to a boyfriend or girlfriend or our significant other, our spouse, maybe to our parents and children, to our friends. They're just three little words. I love you. But they can mean so much, and those three little words can actually change our lives. Today is Maundy Thursday. It's the day that we are reminded of the deep love that Jesus expressed when he humbled himself and got down on his knees and washed his disciples' feet. And it's the day we're mandated to love each other just as Jesus loved us. And as we remember that day and wonder what all of it means for us today, now, those words from John keep tugging at our heart. That on that night, Jesus knew his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. And having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. As we hear how Jesus humbled himself in love to wash feet, we're reminded of what would soon come. When Jesus humbled himself one last time and expressed the deepest possible love he could for us by giving his life on a cross. Who else would do so much to say, I love you? When I think of the deep love that God has for us, especially the deep love that Jesus expressed for us on the cross. I think about all the different meanings that we have for love, the interpretations we have for love, and how often we take love for granted. We tell someone we love them, but in the same breath we talk about how much we love going to the movies, or we love traveling, or ice cream, or a special sports team. Saying I love you to a friend is so much different than saying I love you to your child or your spouse. So when Jesus commands us to love one another just as he loved us, what exactly does that mean? And is it even possible to command someone to love another person? Isn't love a feeling that's beyond commands, that is beyond discipline or human will or logic? Not according to Jesus. You see, when Jesus commanded his disciples to love one another, he didn't use the Greek word phileo, which is the loyal love and affection that we have. It's like the brotherly love we have for our family and friends. And he didn't use the Greek word eros, the erotic, passionate love that we have for our spouse. He used the Greek word agape, which is the most powerful, noblest type of love there is. It's sacrificial love. It's a self-sacrificing love a parent has for a child, and the promise of an ongoing and permanent welcome as the Father's love for his prodigal son. This is the deep love that God has for us through Jesus Christ. Our feelings and emotions are deeply connected to the warm, brotherly, filial love and the passionate love, that the eros love that we experience. But we don't have filio or eros love towards people we don't like, toward people we don't want to be around, especially towards our enemies. But agape love is more than just a feeling. It's an act of the will. It is acting in a loving, sacrificial way to care and serve for others, just as Jesus cares and serves for us, regardless of what our feelings for them may be. When I think of the example of agape love that Jesus gave to us in our gospel lesson this morning of washing the disciples' feet, I think of the agape love that my sister Sharon is giving to my mother, to our mother. Sharon went along with Mom last summer, so it was a while ago, when Mom had her annual physical examination, and the doctor was just about done. He was ready to leave the room when all of a sudden Sharon said, he turned around and said, why don't you take off your socks? I want to check your feet. Well, to their complete surprise, Mom had 2 large sores on both sides of one of her feet. And she admitted they had been there for quite some time, but she didn't think it was a big deal, and so she had Band-Aids on them. She was taking good care of them, and she wasn't even going to mention anything to the doctor. To say that Sharon was a little upset would be a huge understatement. Being a nurse, she knew how serious this was. And being a daughter, she was angry and frustrated and hurt that Mom hadn't said anything to her about it. She knew how stubborn Mom sometimes can be, but she also knew how much help she needed. So for every other day since last summer, Sharon has gone over to Mom's house to take off her old bandages, wash her foot carefully, clean her wounds, apply ointment to them, and then rebandage them. Every other day. She's still doing it till today. But thankfully, after many visits to a wound specialist and many long months of Sharon's perpetual care, one of her wounds is now completely healed and the other is almost healed. Sharon's care goes way beyond her feelings of love for her mother. It was a decision she made that whether she felt like it or not, whether Mom appreciated it or not, no matter what their feelings for each other were for that day or time, Sharon was committed that she would go over every other day to care and serve Mom's foot, to care for her as long as it would take. This is agape love. Because agape love is more about our behavior than about our emotion. It's more about how we act than how we feel about someone or something. And because of that, agape love is something that can be and is commanded by God. Just as Jesus washed the feet of Judas, who he knew was going to betray him, and he washed the feet of Peter, who he knew was going to deny him soon, we too are commanded to express that same agape love to everyone, even to people who hurt us or treat us badly, even our enemies. In all honesty, I have to confess that I have a very hard time doing that. I'd even have a hard time following in Sharon's footsteps and expressing that same agape love to my own mother, who I love, if she lived here in Wisconsin instead of in Minnesota. Maybe that's why this day today is so important for all of us, because honestly, I think it's really hard for all of us to do that, to love, to express that same agape love that Jesus has for us. We mean well and we try, but just like the disciples, we fail miserably. And yet, God continues to reach out to each and every one of us, day after day, washing us from our sin and empowering us through God's Spirit to step out in faith to love and serve others. So we come together today in worship, to worship God, confess our sins, to remember and give thanks to Jesus for his sacrificial love for us. We pour wine and break bread, remembering the last meal that Jesus had with his disciples before he poured out his own life. We strip the altar, remembering how Jesus was stripped, mocked, and crucified for us. And we sit in humble gratitude to our amazing God, who will stop at nothing, not even death itself, in order to say those three little words to us: I love you. Amen.
If you are able, will you please stand for our hymn of the day, hymn number 499.